Okay. So this is a panel discussion today. So we're going to ask you if you have any questions, just chuck your hand in the air, and if we point at you, then we can go ahead and get these expert practitioners here to pontificate on the answers. And the goal for today is that you will walk out of this session being totally gratified by the answers that these three are going to give you. So having done that and put them on the spot, are you comfortable now? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
or answer your own questions too. That's equally welcome. Please chime in.
That's okay. So my name's John Bowie, and I am the CEO of Palm Crest. I do recognise some faces in the room. We're a small company, but we're all over the world, and so we've had a fairly big impact on planning and scheduling in various organisations. In fact, the presentation that just went, we're also down there just setting up the scheduling interface and things like that. So our panel today is Chris Ryde from BHP, and Chris is the Manager of Planning and Asset Health for INOR. Yep. And he's been playing in that space a long time. We always bump into each other on aeroplanes. We have Chloe Franks from Horizon, and Chloe's the Superintendent of Integrated Closures, and she gave a brilliant presentation a few hours ago. I sat through that and some really good information there, so hopefully you'll be able to keep picking her brains. And we have Sam Parsi from Newmont, and Head of Asset Integrity and Reliability globally. So he's a jet setter. He travels all over the world. He picks all the good jobs that he wants, and he ignores the ones that he doesn't want. And he's just got probably the best job here in the room.
No fuel to travel at the moment. So.
But there will be soon. Okay. So and myself, I've been doing this for about 30 years, and I'm desperate to retire. So I'm trying to transition the business on to someone else right now. And hopefully next year, if I'm here, it will be with a cocktail and maybe some sort of flower in my hair or something like that, and going, suckers, but I will come back. But we'll all get there eventually. I want to start this session off by posing a question. Now, I know I have some colleagues in the room who could go, I know the answer to that question, and I would ask you to refrain. Josh, I'm not staring directly at you, but I could be. When we have a shutdown, I just want to ask a simple question. Why do we have shutdowns? Why do we have a shutdown? Now, I'm not going to ask the panellists to give you an answer right now. Anyone brave enough to stick their hand up? Why do we have shutdowns?
We have to maintain our plant.
Have to maintain the plant, yes. We agree with that? You had 90% heads nodding yes, so I want to congratulate you on that. All right. And why else would we have a shutdown? Maximise downtime efficiencies, yes. Processing, yes. I think that's a great answer. Yeah. Anyone else?
You can't work on it while it's running.
It's really dangerous, and you're not allowed to do that anymore. But back in the day, it was a lot of fun, But times have changed. Yep. Good point. Maybe, what if I asked someone in the panel? Maybe the guy with the white shirt. Right.
Good call.
Yeah. So why do we have shutdowns?
I'm cheating. I know John's answer, what he's got in mind. It's to remove risk from the business. The essence of asset reliability performance is to do the right maintenance at the right time, right interval, at the right quality, and to bring it or make it really simple. And at the moment, I'm training for half marathon, and those water breaks, you almost take the analogy of the water breaks you actually have during half marathon or marathon. It's needed. And you think about the operations, it is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So you really need those breaks, those are stops to be able to actually do the right maintenance at the right quality and to be able to get going. And ultimately you do shuts to maximize the availability and reliability of the plant equipment, of your critical assets, and maximize value from your critical assets and at the minimum cost. So breakdowns are expensive. We don't want to have inexperienced breakdowns, burn and crash things. Anyone else?
Yeah, definitely agree with that one. And optimising the downtime, perfect answer. But it's also about, prioritising that work and having that downtime that is removing the safety and the high UED, the high type breakdowns in the same sort of event with the same labour, high utilisation as well. So, Yep. When you're down, but when you're on, you're going to run until the next shutdown with no breakdowns as a plan.
I feel like I can talk quite loud and pretend like I'm on site. Is everyone happy if can you all hear me at the back? They're nodding. Oh no. I don't love microphones. So we've had a perfect example over the last fortnight, absolutely, to remove risk, to increase your asset life, your reliability, to optimise from that utilisation perspective. We've seen it on the flip side with the flooding and the significant wet weather last week, and we can do these in a breakdown scenario, and we can do them quite well. But that cost element is what we've seen. So we have had so many contractors ring us last week. We're here, we're ready. Do you want us to start driving down to Gladstone? Yeah, we do, but we're going to pay for it. And if we can't control the weather, but what we can control is doing shutdowns in a planned, cyclical environment, predicting what works is going in there, and ultimately planning it in a way that is safer for all the boots on ground.
Yeah, that's great. And I think my first awakening with that aspect of why we do shutdowns was well after I started in the maintenance side of the business. And I used to think shutdowns existed so we could fix things. And, it was a really sort of tunneled vision because I was in the maintenance side, not the production side. And then you realise over time that this is a business. So whether you're doing maintenance or production, there's shareholders. And this mine or this asset only exists to make money for the shareholders. Now, it sounds a little bit clinical and you're kind of like, yeah, okay, but that's the reality. And so when the whole aspect is to remove risk, it's to remove risk from the business. It could be financial, it could be safety, it could be maintenance, reliability, it could be anything. But shutdowns is part of a risk management strategy, and that's why we're in the business. So when we look at it that way and we start to look at what is our slice of cake in this whole pie, what are we responsible for, the first thing we ought to look at is what's our part in removing that risk. And then it goes into the things that, that we've all talked about here. So that's kind of like it's like a paradigm shift almost. You start thinking a little bit differently about what your role is, and then you start thinking a little bit differently about being collaborative, and that we have to start interfacing with other areas. So one of the things that comes up in a shutdown is challenge. And if I was to ask the question, I want you to think about one of your greatest challenges that you've had in a shutdown event, and I would like you to tell me what you did to overcome that challenge. And so, Sam, you've got more time to think about it. You've got a little bit more time. And Chloe, I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay. I feel like we have a challenge every shutdown, which is a good and a bad thing. Our teams are excellent at firefighting. That reactive response with the operational teams is absolutely exceptional. We have had instances where we've had the ballast train derail that was obviously doing some ballast drop in a shutdown. That's a significant thing to then recover and lift that back on track, or broken rails and things like that. Those are the things that are coming to mind. When everyone comes together to collaborate and get a fast response is the best outcomes that we tend to see. That comes from time in field, from understanding your operational teams and having really strong relationships with them. We certainly don't want to dictate from an ivory tower, what good looks like, or, what you need to tell us because we have to escalate to the bosses. There's a purpose behind it. We are there to serve them as a shutdown coordination function. They are the ones that are exposing themselves out in field. So how do we help them get the best possible, safest outcome that's also the ultimate outcome for the asset as well?
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was we were in a centralised function area before, 2017 to about 2024, and we've just come back to the asset now. The good stuff we got about centralising, obviously, with the standards, the ways of working and the tools are all standardised globally, so that's awesome, and governed still by that function. But coming back to the assets and coming into that production area as well, we have a maintenance area in production as well, in integrated ops. I got to see that business lens as well, that we are a business. And in that we saw downtimes that were for maintenance, downtimes that were for projects, downtimes that were for this and that and the schedules. It's work that could be done together and optimised, definitely. So one of the biggest things that we did, I think, was in the second year of coming back underway, was remove these downtimes from projects and everyone else and had the one schedule for the area, which was a huge ask up the chain to the leadership to remove those downtimes to major areas like projects for iron ore. It was crazy. But working through that, optimising together and having projects with going through the same sort of methodology challenges as what maintenance do. We had record production in FY26 H1, which was the first year of that budget without the extra windows. So we showed what we could do, and projects and maintenance can work together, but the ways of working, the challenges when you take someone's downtime away from them was crazy. It was, it wasn't no worries, Chris. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about all the shot memories I've had and all the challenges. So fortunate enough to been involved in some of the biggest shots in iron ore, and also having been fortunate enough to have experienced all the natural disasters in the shot. And I've got some familiar faces here, been involved in some of the Area C shots when I was there, but from bushfires to cyclones to floods to pandemic, so just all has happened and fortunately been involved. And I would say COVID, running shots during the COVID, it was just something that no one had experienced. There was no transcript how to actually run during the COVID. And ultimately, I think every shot has got its own unique challenges, as Chloe said, and it comes back to a few fundamentals to be able to actually navigate through it. And I remember through certain shots, as especially things become challenging, I'm finding out that I'm actually sleeping less. And just reflecting on it, finding out throughout the day I'm just on caffeine and having so many coffees. When it gets to the end of the day, then you can't sleep, and that vicious cycle just continues. So really coming back to just managing your physiology during the shot. And secondly, to just anchoring yourself down around and not losing perspective of what matters in life and the bigger picture. Ultimately, keeping the people safe, working for your family, that's the reason you're there. And ultimately keeping the people involved in the shot safe. That's what matters the most. And and the other one is just focusing on what you can control and influence. We talk about planning, we talk about execution. It is absolutely important to do everything you can to control and influence everything you can control and influence. And then there is some matters that just sits outside that, and we don't worry about it, because those are the things outside your control and influence, and there is no what ifs. You reflect back saying, yep, in the planning cycle, I did everything I could, my team did everything we could, and we verified things, and if there are certain things outside that control and influence circle, then that's fine. And the last one is building a strong team around you in the shutdown is really important, because you need those resilient leaders in the shot that when things going unplanned, when things not going, everything going pear-shaped, to be able to actually pick up the pieces and lift the morale and induce that motivation and energy for the people to get to that finish line, and to reinforce everything else we talked about around putting things in perspective and really keep people safe to get to the end shot. So every shot is different, but just focusing on those principles has helped me throughout the years to navigate through some of those tough shots.
Thank you. I'm going to put you on the spot now, because I know you're not ready for this, but if you were invited to a shutdown event, what is the first thing that you would look at to determine the health of that shutdown? And Chloe, I'll
I should
start
not
with you.
have sat here. Can
No,
we
I'll tell you what. I'll start with BHP, because they've done a lot of this. So, there you go, Chris.
I think we're generally in a shutdown as well in the mines. So I look after all the mines shutdowns in the Pilbara from a planning and scheduling point of view. And it's the first thing I read in the morning is the safety incidents. So your first aid cases, your illnesses, it's the first thing I look at. Usually it's just blisters. I shouldn't say just blisters, but yeah, if it looks like it's tracking off, you're getting some of those really bad finger injuries and things like that as well. It gives that flavour of, are you in control? You're having the right conversations, or is it going to lead to a full stop and restart, that sort of thing. So I'd say safety first. You get that feeling you're in control or not.
Okay.
So first thing I'll look at when I go to the shot, I generally look at I have a bit of execution bias. I'll look at the safety standards, and when I say safety standards, if it's in the field, just looking at the standards, housekeeping, barricading, all the simple stuff that creeps into doing high risk activities. So those are one of the first things I'll look at. I'll even look at the war room in the shutdown. how accurate, how up to date, the signs and everything else you've got. Those are the symbols that even though they could be silent, but they're always active, they're always there. And people see those things and pay attention and notice those things. And the nature of the shot is you're working with the transient workforce. You got people that never been on site. It was Ironia that later on said there's a huge number of backpackers now in the shutdown space. So the transient workforce, they come to the site. The first thing they look at is the basics, to figure out and understand what are the standards in this workplace. And if you think about the work environment, the physical, social aspect of work environment, it drives the behaviors. So they look at those things and understand, okay, is it a kind of site that I need to ensure that I'm walking through the designated walkway or not? And everyone comes from, with no bad intention. We had a CEO, when I was at the previous company, used to say nobody comes to work with the intention to get hit. And that is absolutely true. What those are standard, understanding what's accepted, what is not on that particular site, that's really important. And those are standards, what are some of the things I'll look at first.
All right, I've had time to think now. I'm less panicked. I'll give some more specific ones. If I imagine when I go to site, some of the things that I've seen, so the people-plant separation is a big one. Have they got the signage? Have they got the bollards? And I know it's so simple, but you can see immediately the behaviours and the way that team has shown up for work and how they've set up their site. The second one is the pre-start. So the pre-start happens on every site. The biggest thing for us is we always talk on rail traffic impact on worker. So what is protecting them from having a train come through their work site, whether that be a resurf machine, a ballast train, or potentially a revenue train once we hand back. And you'll see them nodding, yep, all right, yep, sign on, cool, lock on, off you go. But when you go up and actually ask them and go, what are your limits? Can they tell that back to you? And for the most part, they can't. They don't understand what their limits are. It's full faith and trust that I'm locking on and I'm protected. When they can say back their limits or go, yep, I've got mast wraps down there, I've got a bollard, a kilometre up that way, those are my visual signs, fantastic. You can see that team is really switched on for safety. So there's those little elements. And the other one is, don't look at the big ticket tasks. Don't look at the really cool machines that you want to go up and talk to when you're in field. Go and talk to the spotters. For the most part, the spotters, it is their first time on site, particularly in a lot of contract vendors. It'll be someone that's come in and they get thrown a spotter vest. They potentially have never had to spot for a bit of mobile plant before in a very tightly constrained rail corridor. Arguably, that is sometimes the most important role that we've got. So go and talk to your spotters. Don't always go and talk to the supervisor. Those are probably some of the little things that I would look for to test, how is it looking?
If that's one of your most important roles, what do you do to train those people so they hit the ground running in the spotter space?
Great question. So we have, pray for me, we have a lot of contractors. So for our internals that perform the spotter role, we obviously have a lot of internal training and verifications through our field leadership that we do. It is harder to control with the transient workforce when the contractors come in. It is the time in field. So it is getting the boots on ground. It is creating the time and the space for supervisors, for engineers, for planners to get out in field and speak to them and coach them. So understand what the risk is of, people plant separation, of mobile plant, and really coach them around what are they looking for. Hey, we've got overheads. What's your clearance for overheads? Have you got an overhead isolation? Are you watching your mast on the back end? Is that machine slewing around? Coach them and mentor them while they're there, given it might be someone completely different next time. But immediately after pre-start, try and jump straight onto that.
Thank you. I think what this also demonstrates with the three answers is that we are focused on what we're interested in. And so from a management perspective, we have this large helicopter view of the shutdown and the things that we need to look at. And we've got our KPIs already in our mind. We know the triggers that are going to make this successful or fail. And when you start drilling down through the different roles, for example, if I was a scheduler, and our role is in that place, the handshake between planning and scheduling is so critical, otherwise the execution phase won't run following the plan and they'll just do their own thing. So my focus has always been, what does the schedule look like? And so one of the things I see when I walk into a shutdown, so if you invite me into a shutdown, I would be very interested in, and not that I'm not interested in safety, by the way, but it's been covered by three things here, so I still have all 10 fingers. And so I walk into a shutdown meeting, and the first thing I see is who's carrying a schedule. And if they're not carrying a schedule, I ask myself the question, are they following it? And if they're either the rain man or they have a schedule. You know, there's kind of no in between, right? So if they're not carrying a schedule and they're not following it, why aren't they following it? Is the schedule bad? Is the planning bad? Have they been there that long that they don't need it and they just do their own thing? And therefore, if that is the case, is there any opportunity for improvement if we don't change anything? So next time you have a shutdown meeting where you're doing your updates and the people in the field are coming in, are they actually carrying something that they can reference? And the question I love to ask every time I'm in one of those meetings, I'll go, hey, line 421, which is change out the underflow pumps by 2:30 today, they're on the critical path. How are we going according to the schedule on that? And then I ask an individual. I'll pick on Josh because I know him, and Josh is going, put your hand up, Josh, everyone's got to see who you are. That's it, just like to embarrass him. And so Josh will be going, holy heck, he's just asked me to pull out the schedule, I'm not carrying it with me. I guarantee Josh is bringing that schedule in tomorrow's meeting. So they're just little things that you can make a big difference that starts flowing onto the culture, which leads me to my next point. And our panel are anticipating. What's John going to ask them now?
You know, no one's going to ask you to a shutdown after that comment from now on.
That's right. Yeah. Don't invite him into our readiness room. So I just want to focus on something that has made a really positive, a very tangible and positive difference over the past 12 months. Something that you went, wow, I had no idea. It might even be a silver bullet, which we're not big fans of, you know, on their own. It could be cultural, it could be anything. But something that really made a big impact, a low-hanging fruit type of example, if you've got something. I'll let one of you speak first, so I'm not putting you on the spot.
Mine's probably really minor, so I can jump in with this one. But we had a central function that all the operational teams reported into. So it was essentially a central admin group that took all of the updates across all of the sites. And it can be, 6 hours of driving time between the closures, so significantly dispersed. We turned that off and we brought that, in-house to the shut coordination team and said, we want all of your updates to us directly so we can have a two-way conversation. That helped increase trust. It helped them, believe that we are here to help, and they started to see the value of escalating early and talking to us because we would immediately be throwing back options. Okay, you're going to be 2 hours late for resurf. What about this? Could we bring this forward? Have you got restress ready? Can we schedule slide? So we'd always be talking about those critical milestones, all those bottlenecks to the people that we needed to talk to, and it really helped create that buy-in.
Excellent.
I think for me it'd be probably about a year ago when we needed to do something differently in shutdowns. Our trends weren't going the right way in terms of duration and costs as well. And maintenance has generally never been good at business cases either. And that's when we say, we never improve fast enough and we never do this from maintenance because we're not really setting ourselves up for success with our business cases either to senior leadership. We did have a asset president who did have a maintenance background, and we said we need to put more support into our shutdown management tools and things like that in our ecosystem. He goes, yeah, we'll frame up what you need, how much money do you need, people, all that sort of stuff. So we did a proper business case up and took 14 people from the front line out of role with a shutdown lead for 6 months with some funds with technology as well. And we're able to build tools and things from the front line of what they'll actually use and not somebody from the Perth office delivering something to them that they wouldn't. So I think in terms of culture, it was a good enabler as well. But to get sufficient support in a short amount of time would be a good success. But yeah, business case writing and maintenance planning and maintenance in general, yeah, good improvement.
Past 12 months, haven't been directly involved in the shutdowns. However, a general theme within the industry, I would say, these integrated tools and technology. Just looking at 5-10 years ago, live tracking of the GANs, it was not quite feasible. There were thoughts about it, but there were no mature solutions around being able to actually do that, to have live information to be able to make the right decisions with the agility that you need during the shutdown. So certainly I would say integrated tools and technology and to be able to bridge the gap between the planning and the preparation and the execution. We still got massive opportunities to unlock in the mining industry and in shutdowns in general. Now, I know there has been many sessions around AI, introduction of AI. If I think about maintenance asset management, there's still massive opportunities around utilising AI, and not just case studies, but having solutions that are fully implemented and proven. Whether it's in the long-term planning case around sequencing activities and optimizing shutdown durations in the long run, or whether it's use of AI in their scheduling or live tracking of the GANs, there are lots of opportunities, and we still haven't scratched the surface.
So that's interesting. I wanted to touch on AI at some point, and we've been experimenting with AI in the scheduling space and had some mixed results. And the work that we've been doing in there, we realised that AI has got a certain limitation, but there's a new version of AI, like super intelligence, which can do a lot of the things, but it could probably turn it into Skynet at the same time. So they haven't actually released it to people like us. There's probably a good reason. But is AI something that is transforming? Is it transforming your business at this point in time?
I'll go first since I'm holding the mic for some reason. I think mainstream last year in Melbourne, we had a panel discussion like this, and it was one of my peers that was on the panel as well, and we're talking about AI, and they didn't get any questions from the group out there. And that's when light bulb moment for me is, are we all just bluffing our way through this, that we think we know what AI is and what all these other things are? And straight away, as soon as we got back from Perth, my whole leadership team went on an AI course for a couple of days just so we can actually know what's going on. And then, fast forward a year since then, and we are still doing some proof of concepts in that ourselves, and we have talked to a few vendors in that as well. But still experimenting, I'd say, as well with shut scheduling. A good case, which is in production now, is maintenance meta model that we have in iron ore. So beforehand, we'd do our shutdown schedules and we'd say, shut down there, shut down there. Okay, what does that look like to production? And it'd be about a week to get the data back. Now we have one of those supply chains on the maintenance side, and we can do this ourselves without going to production and doing silly scenarios like, let's do all 5 mines down at the same time. What does that look like? Oh, look, 10,000 people, things like that. But we can play around with that ourselves, and it's agentic AI, so it's learning from live stockpiles, all sorts of cool stuff as well. So there is a good business case, but experimenting.
Yeah, excellent. I think similar to buckets. There are certain areas that we got some mature solutions and being used, but generally, I would say there are buckets, and integration of different areas of the value chain. Use of AI is still something that some time
still happening.
Away from.
Yeah. Who's using AI in their business out? Put your hand up if you're writing AI, right? And so just keep an eye on those people. Artificial intelligence, yes. Okay. I could share something with you. About 10 years ago, I was at a conference in, I think it was Houston, and the guy had an iPad, and he held the iPad up and he pointed it to a pump. They had a mock-up pump there. And then on this iPad, a wired drawing turned up on the iPad, and then he said, show me the bomb. So I did a bill of materials and did all that, and I'm standing there going, wow, this is pretty impressive. And then he said, show me the condition monitoring. So it had oil analysis, had vibration analysis, had all of that stuff. What campaign should it fit into? What revision number, what campaign, whatever, in terms of the shutdown? And so it said, according to its running condition right now, we can fit this. The optimal fit for this is the November shutdown. And so he just goes November shutdown, becomes part of the November shutdown. It does all its bill of materials, does everything. And this is 10 years ago, right? And we're just going, wow. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. I said, and so then I think there was about 500 people in Houston. And I said, how long has this been out? And he said, it's been out a year and a half. Who's using it? Not one person put their hand up. Who's using it in New Zealand? Not one person. Who's using it in Australia, both sides? Not one person. Who's using it in Africa? No one put their hand up. And so I really looked into this and I thought, this is great technology, right? Why wasn't it working? Why aren't we using it? Can anyone guess why we weren't using it? Audience?
Throw a spanner in the works. Ours is definitely an element of that is workforce demographic. We are struggling to get timesheets done on a computer. So they are pretty old school in their approach, and it is a battle, all of the small changes that we're making. So we are making lots of incremental changes. And I will admit, we're not ready for AI yet because our data is not mature enough. If we were to turn it on, we're not going to get any value out of it, and it's going to waste money and create distrust. So we need to ramp up to get ready for it because it is coming, and I'm excited hearing that kind of stuff and what's happening at BHP now. And I would love to be able to copy and paste at Horizon, but we have a significant amount of work to do over the next 12, if not 24 months to be able to trust what that produces for us.
I would suggest it's even longer. So the biggest failure mode for this program was the master data wasn't there. No one had the master data. Now, if you get back to why do we, do shutdowns, why do we do anything, it's managing risk, right? Risk is also a financial thing. So right up at the top of the tree where I call the grown-ups live, so all the grown-ups are there and they're making the decisions and they're going, hey, we don't have money for that. What value is it going to add? Because they don't see the granular level that we see. So one of the biggest hurdles I think that we have in any business is that the master data is not ready. And so I can see in order for AI to go in leaps and bounds, we need to start getting back into master data teams and getting things sorted out, because we have a crack at it for 3 months or a year, and then we don't do anything for 5 years. And then all your 3D drawings, everything just goes out the window. So I don't know if you've had that experience.
I think it's definitely a piece of knowing your customers as well. Like, why haven't we done tracking of digital wires and shutdowns in the last couple of years? That's because the infrastructure hasn't been there. I couldn't make a phone call on one of our plants, let alone anything else. So it's definitely the infrastructure, knowing what your site's Wi-Fi connectivity is and spending all that background money on your infrastructure before you even look at anything in the first case. Definitely. That was an eye-opener. We can make phone calls now from all of our plants, though.
That's a leap forward.
So there's a plus. Yep. It's the same thing with the business case, though, in terms of master data as well. What do you need? You're not going to update everything. What's your critical equipment you want to update? Your bombs and what sort of flocks are they and all that sort of stuff. Is prioritising it. What do you need? And those sort of business cases. So as a senior leader, you wouldn't say no to something that's going to get accurate data and return on investment and save time and stuff. Definitely not. Yeah.
Let's put the challenge on AI to fix the master data. I think that would be a great solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and the other thing with AI is I went in and I said, hey, give me a shutdown process. Give me a 7-phase shutdown process because I wanted to look at it, right? So whatever you do, you might be a soccer coach or something like that, ask it to give you a year 12 soccer program, if that's what you do, or put in something that you know, not something you don't know, but something you do know, because here's what happened. It gave me this 7-phase approach to managing shutdowns, and I go, well, Palm Crest doesn't need to exist anymore. AI can do it for you. You don't have to call us. And then I read it. And it was kind of like a word salad. There was lots of words, and they were all over the place. And if I was to take those words and those paragraphs and I put them in the right order, I had a nice 7-phase shutdown process. But I had to do that. And I did that with my 30 years of experience. And so you'll do that as a soccer coach. You'll go, yeah, no, we don't do that before we do this, and you'll move it around. That's where it's at the moment. So we're still going to need people to manage the inputs that come out of this. One of the memes that is sort of around, the guy says to AI, can I eat this mushroom? AI goes, yes. The next, imagine this in your head, he's lying in hospital in a coma. And AI's talking to him and saying, yes, you can eat these mushrooms, but they're also poisonous. Would you like to know more about poisonous mushrooms? And I think that is where we have to be very careful with AI, embrace it and bring it on, but it certainly is in a space that we need to align it with our own expertise, evaluate it, and then implement it after maybe peer reviewing it, should I say, when we get that rolling. One of the questions I'd like to ask is, how hard is it to, and some sites are older than others, and you may relate to this, how hard is it to get the change that you need to get the progress that has to happen? What is the biggest hurdle to implementing change? And not just what's the biggest hurdle, tell me a success story, so. Yeah.
And once there we go. I think changing the shot, the challenge is, as mentioned before, is around the transient workforce and the fact that there is significant dependency on your business contracting partners. So you can't do it alone. And also to make the change stick, again, you need that to figure that dependency and to be able to work with your contracting partners. But in general, the concept of change in the shot, I don't think is any different to any other change, that you provide the context, you provide the reason for the change, you create a sense of urgency around it and get people involved in coming up with the solution, being part of whatever feature state you have in mind, and then is around the implementation and building enough checkpoints and verification to make sure that change is going to stick and it is actually meeting the intent. So managing that change is no different, but I would really say shutdown change, it's about your extended leadership team and extended team by bringing the contexts involved and just make them part of the change. It's not always easy, especially now that number of contractors that you actually use in the shot have increased. You may not necessarily have that continuity to bring the same contractor every time. However, the key to success and making the changes stick is to actually have them part of the process.
I'll just barge you over. No. The hardest thing for us is having change be sustainable. We reflect on not the big, shiny, big ticket changes, but how do we just do 100 small things? All of the constant little things are always a win on the board. For us, being spread all across Queensland, we really struggled with the relationships and the stakeholder alignment with our northern teams. So our team is predominantly based in Rockhampton, which means it's really easy for us to get to the Blackwater depot and to get to the Gladstone depot. It's a little bit harder to get out to Moranbah and Mackay. That's at least a day trip of driving. So the comms weren't great. So that change for us, we did see some really good results by investing a lot more time up north. So our team went mobile and we started running shuts from up north, which I know BHP shut schedulers are based on site, I believe, in execution, which is fantastic. So we kind of went to that model and we noticed a chalk and cheese relationship with the civil and electrical teams up there. What it helped with is all of the contract vendors got to know us and got to know what we do in the background, because sometimes it is, the silent players in shut coordination. So now they know that they can reach out as well. So we're starting to get a lot better communications, which means we are recovery planning a lot faster and we are seeing less cancellations of trains. So a really strong result.
Good shout out to Rocky as well.
Yeah. You can hear the twang in my voice, can't you?
My team also pick it out with me, so great.
Yeah.
Yep. I think for me it's learning from previous, when no war stories, definitely not, but previous times where it hasn't gone well and you've rolled something out and it's been a disaster and you've learned from that. And that is making sure that when you do have a major change that you do invest in the ops readiness, the right people that front line again to share that change. And it's really, you want to get it out to that layer. It's not top down and stop at superintendent and then wonder why the change isn't happening. It's because the doers, supervisors, coordinator level, they're the people you really want to spend time on culturally, make sure that they are with the change, not just trying to drink the Kool-Aid because it's a green KPI for them. So it's, I think it's having the resources and hitting it at the right level. Yeah.
Okay. I actually, at lunchtime, I learned a new term today, and it was called watermelons. And I have never heard that before. Did everyone know what that is?
Work management, we're talking about?
Red on the outside, red on the inside.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a very...
Or a perfect S-curve.
So just put your hand up, Daniel. Yeah, he talked. So I learned something today from Daniel, and it was called watermelons. And I hadn't... But it's so true, isn't it? And so that brings me to authenticity, because there is nothing worse than people who don't believe in you when you're trying to get a team together. And I just... So let me tell if you can pick this movie. You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. Come on, who knows the movie? Who said that? A Knight's Tale. Very good. Now, could you imagine you're in a shutdown environment, and the shutdown manager gets up, and uses something like that out of a movie, or perhaps you can't handle the truth, or, you know, all those cliches. But I've actually been in meetings where people have been trying to get a message across, and they've used that, and you can see everyone on their face just going, good grief, you know, and they just tune out, and because it was more of a moment that person thought they were being cool than it was about an actual truthful communication to help someone. And I think in the shutdown space, particularly in leadership, we have to be really careful of that. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but that's really an important thing. And I get to work with management, and I also get to work with the planners and the schedulers, and so I see the paradigm from both ends, you know, how they view the business and how they view each other. And so when I work with management teams that have no idea what a good schedule looks like, and they put these KPIs that end up being watermelons because they just don't make sense, and then you don't have buy-in from the team, then that becomes an issue. And then you've got the team who, I don't want to use the term brainwash, but I did, so I'm going with it. So they have their own paradigm about how everyone's against them, and they may have formulated that because they're hearing cliches, and they're hearing all these things that aren't really resonating with them. And if you're not resonating with your people, you've got some major issues. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that process at all.
No, I think I'm definitely up there for most shutdowns. One of my customers is in the audience, and I missed their last shutdown. Sorry, Newman, staring at me right now. But it's they can pick out when you're giving a shareholder update in a war room compared to being somebody that's real and approachable, that they can talk to about concerns and actually doing something with it, and that you say you're going to give them feedback, you do. So I think it's just being a real person, not giving them a shareholder update and staying at that level, I think.
I think you've covered it. Ultimately comes back to showing genuine care for people. And if you do that, and if you appeal to the nobler motives, people can connect, and it does resonate with people. And so ultimately, I think it's all about genuinely caring for people and doing the right thing. And I think people understand that.
I feel like I'm controversial with my ideals, although really random. So here's another random one. We get a lot of feedback that in shutdowns, people just get hammered. Absolutely hammered by visitors. On one instance, they did 15 pre-starts, 15 groups of people that went to a ballast undercutting site throughout one day. That supervisor had to pre-start and lock on, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it's just a time wastage. And it wasn't people that were executing work or, you know, contributing real value. It was the tourists of, oh, can I get a photo of this? And that's fantastic, but time and place. And it is a high pressure, high stakes environment. So how do you create that space for the supervisors to push back and go, no, this is critical path now, and I really just need to focus on my site. Invest the time outside of shutdowns to get to know the teams, particularly if you have got employees as part of that team as well, which we are fortunate enough to have some employees as well across the depots. They love when you go out and talk to them outside of the shutdowns, when they're not really busy and doing those, those long hours and shifts. Like, invest that time to have the discussions about the KPIs and the why and the improvement ideas, and really have that brainstorming time where you're not standing there and they're trying to drop a weld. That has helped us immensely, and there is still an incredible amount of field leadership that needs to go on in shutdowns, but there's other elements that you can attack as well. The amount of times we go into recovery planning and people come in the room, oh, hey, can you tell us what's happening? No? We're escalating, we're going through the process. Can we control the space and, do it in a really structured manner so we're not sitting there re-explaining it over and over? That's really helped us.
Yeah, and they're really good points, because we get a lot of new people on shutdowns too. And one of the things that I see a lot of, you rock up on site for the first time, and your instructions to get there haven't been all that great. For some unknown reason, there's 5 buses there and not one of them has a sign on it. And it's almost like a rite of passage, like, oh, I picked the right bus, I'm off on the right foot here, And so you ask someone and they go, I don't know. And eventually you get to site and well, where do you put you get your keys? Oh, mate, you don't get your keys till 2 o'clock, so you should have gone straight to site and then come back afterwards. And so just little things like that I see all the time. I rocked up on one site, I was only there for one night, and so I had my high vis on, and I went into the mess to get a meal that night, and there's a rule for no high vis, but it wasn't in the induction, and I didn't have another T-shirt and I couldn't buy one, and so I had to eat outside like a leper. And it didn't make me feel great. I wasn't part of the team, and I had a low confidence level when I went into my meeting the next day. Anyway, after therapy, we got through it all. But so there's things like that we overlook, and it's that little granular stuff that makes a difference. It's the little handshakes that make a difference. And so when I think about that, we often have a thing called poor planning. Who's heard of poor planning?
No.
No one put their hand up. Unbelievable. If you're going to be part of this conversation, have you heard of poor planning? Come on, yes or no? If you say no, I'm going to talk you outside. All right. So a lot of no's still. Can you believe that? Right. Poor planning is the absolute worst thing you can say to a planner or a scheduler, because there's a thing called preparation. And if I was to say, what is the difference between planning and preparation? Who owns planning and who owns preparation? What does that mean?
I'll jump in. I truly believe it is a shared accountability between our network asset managers, our planning function, and our operational teams. We can't build an optimal plan unless we have that input from operational teams. Then when we shift into a preparation, which I'm interpreting as more immediately prior to going to execution, that accountability shifts a little bit heavier onto the operational teams. We want them to escalate back very quickly. Are your critical spares on site? Have you had any issues with resourcing, mobilising? Like, what do we need to intervene on quickly? So it does shift depending on the phase, but I do believe it is a shared accountability, and I hate the broad strokes, and we get it all the time. Oh, planning sucks, or planning stuffed up this shutdown. Okay, everyone has a part to play. Was the scope deliverable to start with? Did you attend the planning meetings and collaborate to understand if this was achievable or escalate your concerns? And then what was the comms that was happening in execution as well? Everyone has a part to play.
You don't have to be nice because I'm sitting here either. It's fine. Yeah, definitely. I think it's in the core routines as well, like Lithium was talking about before with the readiness routine. So they're there together as a team together each week or whatever the frequency is, talking about the shutdown, the major critical path stuff, all that sort of thing as well. What we're starting to do now is also ramp down, is also in a work order as well for production, just so we have that somewhere. So just so we can resource that up. Why is the plant taking 36 hours to clean? Can we help with resourcing from a maintenance side as well? So, yeah.
I think the prep is that grey-black area that sits between planning and execution, and a lot of things fall through the crack when it comes to prep because there's a lack of clarity around who's actually accountable, who's responsible, who's going to do it. And one thing I've seen very commonly happens in the shut is not having multiple layers of verification built in the process. And as a result, people make an assumption that someone else has done it, someone else is going to check it, someone else has checked it. And it's the assumptions that we make and not having verified things, that's where it leads to the surprises in the shut and things going unplanned. So documenting and really having a documented process around the preparation and clarity around roles and responsibilities. Great example, when I was in the operational role, we had massive issues with rotables. The gearboxes, pulleys, they come in with different variations of right-hand drive or left-hand drive because we had gone through the process of consolidating things. As a result, they had the same material number, but they were not the same. And good example of prep was actually using the system to work for us. And so we created these sub-orders after work orders to actually go and replace these gearbox and pulley. And that sub-order would have come 2 weeks prior to the shutdown as soon as the part is available on site. Someone go and actually verify and check, is this the right pulley, is this the right gearbox? And if not, it's still short window, but it gives you an opportunity to go and correct it. But just using the system and having clarity around who's going to go and do that, it helped. And then from shutdown planning process or readiness, there was a task in the shut readiness tool that raised the sub orders for all of the work orders that we're going to do around pulleys and gearboxes. So yeah, prep is a dark or grey area, but clarifying roles and accountabilities in there helps and using the system.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Preparation is definitely something that can get lost. As you say, it can fall through the cracks really easy. And for me, the remedy was to have those preparation tasks in a shutdown readiness program that we checked off that it was taken care of. I've worked on a shutdown when I was a planner in the Bismarck Sea, and everything had to come by boat. And if you didn't check something and you hadn't prepped it, you could screw up the whole shutdown. Sure. In fact, one shutdown was so bad when we first went there that it actually stopped the shares on the share market from trading, that they had an overrun and affected production. And you don't think people were a little bit hurt over that. So it's just those little things that can make a massive difference in that space. Another grey area, I like to call it a unicorn, because it's a very rare animal. No one's really nailed it down. And it really has a huge impact on our planning process, is what I call scope freeze. And I call it a unicorn because people, they know about it, but they haven't really seen it work, and why is that? Why can't we get scope freeze to work properly? What the heck? Hey?
So triggered.
Yep.
I feel like I have this argument every day. So we have the concept of scope freeze, and in theory, it's a great idea. And I've seen it be done better in other places that I've worked. For us, though, we are in a cost-constrained, access-constrained, resource-constrained shutdown. And when we escalate and go, is this a best for business scope item to come in? 90% of the time, it is. So we've had to reframe our team's thinking of, not, it's all this late change and how dare my plans change. Okay, you are a technical expert for a reason. This is built into your role now, and you are achieving business outcomes. These are directly hitting our KPIs of usable capacity, train running, scope deliverability, resource utilisation. There are benefits to that. I'm not saying there's not a trade-off, and we do push back on things that introduce significant risk on the safety front, if we're changing safe working or critical rail traffic movements. So it is a judgment call, and you do need to have a balanced approach. That balance, though, in the last probably 12 to 18 months has shifted because the push is do more with less. So how do you do that with the right team and do it safely is the challenge.
Yeah, righto. Yeah, I think scope freeze, I think, is now called scope acceptance in our area, but I definitely do want to change that wording around back the other way. And same with schedule freeze and schedule acceptance, because apparently it's a living beast. But yeah, I think it's definitely on the KPI side, 100%. No more than 10% sort of scope churn, I think, in the work orders. But yeah, it's plant dependent as well. I mean, in iron ore, the wear rates are significantly high, and in our area, we only open them up to have a look at the chute every 16 weeks, so 3 times a year. But what I get peed off at is the work that's come in that they did know about. So it's the unknown, unplanned stuff that we just opened it, the hole was this big, now it's this big, that's fine. But it's the work that comes in that we did know about last month. That, yeah, I think it depends on what it is coming in as well.
I've always tried to have a pragmatic approach when it comes to scope freeze. And one of the things we did, shutdown superintendent, the maintenance execution or superintendent, shared KPIs around shut and also plan availability. And what that means, the actual plan superintendent was accountable for delivering after shut on time, had influence. And then also our shutdown superintendent had KPI around ensuring that plan is safe, reliable, meeting our production targets. So that's helped to resolve some of the back and forth around a scope freeze, understanding, is it critical to plan safety and reliability post-shut? Is it really critical work that needs to be done? So by doing that, then having a risk-based approach to what really goes past the scope freeze, we still froze the scope, but then there was a process around risk-based prioritization and justifying why the work needs to go in, but also being prepared to ask the hard questions. Because reality is there were times that people knew about the work, they didn't necessarily take an action in time and waited, and the scope freeze is passed. Now they're trying to put the work in the shut. And those are the ones that setting clear expectation and holding people to account just help to drive that discipline. And then the conversation was, is it critical to the plant reliability of shut and safety?
Okay, so Horizon's triggered by scope freeze. BHP's changed the whole wording, as they do with everything. You know, they got their own shutdown language, and and Newmont's thrown it back to the people. Not our problem. You got to fix this. But so it sounds like scope freeze is still a problem, right? And it's always going to be. But you know what? It's never going to be perfect. And that kind of leads me to who has seen a perfect shutdown. Now think of the definition of perfect. Who has seen a perfect shutdown? We've been doing this a long time. I would say that if you have seen a perfect shutdown, you're not of this planet. It didn't happen here, and I don't think there is any such thing as perfect. So what's the next best thing to perfect? What could we hope for? If it's not perfect, what could we hope for? Prayers? Scope freeze. Prayers help, yeah. So the word I'm thinking of I want to throw at you is optimal performance. All right, so it's kind of like the monkey and the elephant, and today's goal is to climb a tree. You know, if everyone has an optimal performance, obviously the monkey's probably the best fit for the job, but if all you've got's an elephant, then, you know, maybe the tree has to be pushed down, you know. So how do we get optimal performance? And one of the things I just want to lead in with is I've done a lot of, well, our team have done a lot of training over the years. We go out and we train people. We say, this is how you build a schedule, this is how you do this. And our experience has been after that training, give it 6 weeks or 3 months, that they kind of default back to their old way of doing something because they forget, they can't answer a question. And so they default back. And so we're not getting that optimal performance. So one of the things that we've done is when we mentor people, when you think about that, it's a little bit different, mentoring to training. Mentorers, we're there 1 day every month or 1 day every week or whatever the case may be. And we're constantly evaluating and mentoring. And then you start to get that optimal performance out of that individual. How do we get it out of a team? How do we get optimal performance out of a shutdown team?
Can we disagree on the perfect shot? If you have a shutdown that is perfection can be quite subjective, but if you have a shutdown that is safe, if you execute the critical scope that you set out to execute, and if you finish on time within budget, to me that's a perfect shot. And does it happen every time? No. And there are things that get thrown at you that is unplanned and unforeseen, and as a result, you got to make some trade-offs. But there has been shots that we've actually been able to hit those 4 elements, and with consistency, with building those, looking back and learning and building those learnings into the process systems you see more of those perfect shots than you see non-perfect shots. But yeah, optimally, I think you have to plan for the perfect shot. Otherwise, you get the result that is much worse than what could be a perfect shot. So going back to your question, that was the perfect shot. But how do you get the best out of your team?
We've got 2 minutes.
1 minute.
1 minute, folks.
I'll be quick then. I think it's definitely from your learning. So when you talk about the cost balance versus the risk balance, we've tried some things to, especially with somebody that's in the room that used to work for BHP, where we've cut down a few of the prep days just to save a bit of money and see if that worked out for us. So we have tried different areas and different things, but learned from it, I think, where you can cut and can't cut.
I love Sam's comment, reframe what perfection is. Things don't always go to plan, and that's okay, but how do you pivot when they don't go to plan? And there's absolutely many examples where the team come together in a really structured way, and what's within your sphere of control, you do the best that you can. That is a perfect outcome with the cards that you've been dealt.
Great, thank you. I want to thank our panel for coming here today and sharing. And although we haven't had a lot of time, and I really try to drain some questions out of you guys, so seriously, they will be available if you want to ask specific questions after the event or throughout today. So please take time to reach out and ask the questions that you need to ask. So thanks, Peter.